Run! It's coming!
Get out of the way!
Help us!
What if everything you've ever believed about the beginning of human history is only a fragment, a surface-level version of something far more unsettling? What if the earliest chapters of humanity were not simple, not innocent, but layered with mystery, tension, and forces beyond what we can easily explain? Imagine that the story you think you know is only the outer shell, and beneath it lies something deeper, darker, and far more complex. Because buried within ancient records is a narrative that doesn't just describe where we came from. It reveals a world that rose with brilliance, fell into corruption, and collapsed under the weight of its own choices. And if you listen closely, you begin to sense something unsettling. This story is not only about the past, it feels like a warning written across time. Long before empires carved their names into history, before kings crowned themselves rulers of nations, before the first organized wars echoed across continents, there existed a world that felt both familiar and completely alien. It was a world where humans did not measure life in decades, but in centuries. A world where knowledge advanced with surprising speed, where creativity flourished, and yet where violence grew alongside it. A world where the line between the physical and the unseen was not as firmly drawn as it is today. This world did not begin in chaos. It began in perfection. But perfection did not last. Everything shifted after humanity's first moral collapse. This was not a technological failure. It was not a natural disaster. It was a decision, a choice that introduced something entirely new into existence, something that would reshape everything that followed. The first recorded death in human history was not caused by disease nor by age. It was not an accident. It was deliberate. It was personal. It was violent. Two brothers stood together in a field. One walked away. The other never did. That moment was more than a tragedy. It was a revelation. It exposed something hidden within the human heart, the capacity to create, to love, to build, and also to destroy. From that moment forward, humanity did not stop. It continued to grow, to build, to expand. But what it built carried a dual nature. Beauty and darkness began to grow side by side. The first city ever recorded in human history was not founded by a peaceful visionary or a wise leader. It was established by a man who carried the weight of blood on his hands, a man who chose independence over accountability. He built a city and named it after his son, as if to establish a legacy that would outlive his actions, as if a name could silence the echo of what had been done. Within that city, something remarkable began to unfold. Generations passed, but not as we understand them today. These were lives stretching across centuries. Imagine a single individual living long enough to influence not just children and grandchildren, but entire eras. In such a world, influence does not fade. It multiplies. From this lineage came pioneers. One learned to manage livestock, shaping early systems of survival. Another discovered the power of sound, giving birth to music and artistic expression. Another learned to shape metal, forging tools that would transform both construction and conflict. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. These innovations did not exist in isolation. The same family that produced music also produced weapons. The same hands that created beauty also shaped instruments of destruction. Art and violence were not enemies. They were companions. Then, a voice rose, one of the earliest recorded speeches in human history. But it was not wisdom. It was not a prayer. It was not peace. It was pride. A man stood before his family and boasted about taking a life. Not only that, he declared his vengeance would surpass those before him. Violence was no longer hidden. It was celebrated. It had become identity. Yet, alongside this growing corruption, another lineage quietly existed, less visible, less dominant, but deeply significant. While one group built cities and expanded influence, the other preserved something far more fragile and far more powerful. They preserved their connection to God. From this line came individuals who lived differently. They did not dominate. They did not boast. They walked in alignment with something greater than themselves. One of them walked so closely with God that his life ended in a way that defied nature. He did not die. He was taken. Another lived longer than any human ever recorded, as though time itself was waiting. Then something began to happen, something that should not have happened. The boundaries of reality began to blur. Ancient records describe beings, sons of God, interacting with humanity in ways that crossed a line never meant to be crossed. This was not symbolic language. The descriptions are deliberate and repeated. Something entered the human world, and the effect was immediate. A new kind of being appeared, powerful, dominant, and renowned. Figures whose presence reshaped the balance of power on Earth. These were not ordinary humans. Imagine living in that world, where strength could not be matched, authority could not be challenged, and dominance was absolute. Humanity began to feel smaller, and corruption spread, not just morally, but fundamentally, as if the very structure of humanity was being altered. Then comes one of the most chilling observations ever recorded. Every thought, every intention, was continually inclined toward evil. Not occasionally, not in moments of weakness, but constantly. This was not simply a broken world, it was a world turned upside down. And yet, in the middle of it all, there was one man. Not the strongest, not the most powerful, but different. While the world drifted into chaos, he remained steady. And then he received instructions that must have sounded impossible. Build. Not a house, not a shelter, a vessel. Massive, detailed, precise. And here's what makes it extraordinary. There had never been rain, no reference, no example, no history. And yet, he believed. So he began, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, building. Imagine the reactions, the laughter, the doubt. And still, he continued. Each strike of the hammer was an act of faith, until the final days. Animals began to move, coming from every direction. And then, a door closed, not by human hands. Then the sky changed. Water fell from above. Water rose from below. The world that stood for centuries began to disappear. Cities vanished. Power meant nothing. Everything built without God was erased. Inside the vessel, there was silence. And then, eventually, the waters receded. The door opened. The world was different, quieter, empty, a reset. And the first act was not power, but worship. But the story doesn't end there, because the same patterns returned. Which raises a question that echoes through time. If a complete reset could not change humanity, what could? The warning remains. A world advancing rapidly, knowledge increasing, boundaries blurring, morality shifting, people continuing as usual, unaware, or perhaps aware, but choosing not to respond, because the greatest danger is not rebellion. Sometimes, it is indifference. So the question is not just about the past, it is about now. Are these patterns new or echoes? Because if they are echoes, then they are reminders. And the door is still open. For now. So the real question is simple. What will you do while there is still time? If this perspective has opened your eyes to something deeper, you are exactly where you need to be. Stay connected to Sacred Depth, where we uncover the hidden layers and powerful truths that challenge everything you think you know. Don't just watch, be part of the conversation. Like, share, and subscribe to Sacred Depth for more stories that will open your mind and keep you coming back for more.